Today I'm going to talk about specifically how to use social media in the event space. Now, I was at an event recently where I was shown the definition of the word complex, and obviously you all know the definition of the word complex. I'm sure I'm not going to go into the details, but if you swap the word complex for social, then the definition pretty much still stands up. Which is why when I speak to a lot of people and they look for a simple answer to what social media is and how they can use it for their business, that there's not always a simplified answer. Now, I've tried my best today and I've distilled it into 6 key focus areas. This applies to any business that wants to adopt a social media mindset and a social media strategy for their business. And so a bit about me. So I come from an IT background primarily, and I've found my way to social media via digital marketing. I've worked for clients such as Sky, O2 and Marks and Spencer, among others. And over the past couple of years, I've grown my presence in the social media space. I've been a guest on BBC TV and radio a few times talking about the subject. My primary focus now is about how businesses can use social media to achieve real business objectives. I'm aware that there are a lot of businesses still out there that are focusing on the wrong metrics in the social media space. I know we have a few marketers here today, and you'll be aware of this. Fans and followers aren't a guarantee of more business. They're not even a guarantee of more brand awareness. And yet more people are looking for more likes and more retweets and some of these engagement stats. But again, does that really reflect on the bottom line every time? So one of the key features of everything I talk about in social is rooted in real business objectives. It's about leads, it's about opportunities, it's about growing revenue, growing client base. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. So the first stage of my 6-step social strategy for events is noise reduction. I think it's a fair comment that social media is a noisy space, especially Twitter. If you follow any Premiership footballers, you'll know what kind of hot water people get into on Twitter. How can you find the gems of information? It's not all people telling you what they have for breakfast. It's quite a big business-focused conversation. There's a conversation about your business, more than likely. How do you find those conversations? How do you stay on top of it? I was quite fortunate yesterday, in fact, to be working with an events company in London. And we did some research into who was talking about them. They're not terribly prolific on social media. They don't use Facebook and Twitter for many of their events. And yet there's already a conversation online still happening about them regardless. This is a typical graph of the volume of conversation that takes place around an event. I've removed the names to protect the innocent, but you can see that generally speaking, the peak around the conversation across Twitter, across Facebook, on blogs, on news sites, on video sharing sites, and the emerging image sharing sites as well, like Instagram and Pinterest, that all happens on the day of the event. There tends to be a bit of preamble in the run-up to the event, people talking about what their plans are for the upcoming week, bloggers telling their readers about what's coming up in the next few days in the calendar schedule. And then it tends to tail off the conversation shortly after the event to practically nothing for the rest of the year. We're dealing with an annual event here, and that's the case for many events companies I know. So one of the challenges, I think, is about maintaining a volume of conversation throughout the year so that you maintain some connection with the audience that you're trying to reach. We can get some real valuable insights about where the conversation is taking place. These graphs are all coming out of a tool called Brandwatch, which I'll go into more detail about later. Social media monitoring is a big focus and a useful tool for listening to the social conversation that may or may not already be taking place about you and your products. We can also break down the conversation per day. What we've found in the event space is that in the run-up to an event, quite a lot of the news channels will be talking about it. They'll be breaking stories about who's going to be appearing. That's the PR people doing their work. At the event, lots of attendees will be talking. Lots of exhibitors will be promoting their stand, trying to get visitors to come and see them. That's the kind of live in the moment effect. And then in the days after, you'll see the bloggers will get involved. Their reviews of the event. What did they see? What were the products and the services? Who were the speakers that really got their attention? We also see who it is that's talking. We can go down to individual level. Who are the tweeters who were most prolific? Who are the ones that have been the greatest advocates of what we're doing? Who was most vocal? What's their level of influence as well? We'll talk about that shortly. Because if somebody's only got 10 followers and they say something negative perhaps about your event, is that really important? Is anybody really likely to see that? Is that going to have any kind of effect on your brand reputation? That's an important factor of this. We also get to see the top sites, the different web properties on which these conversations are taking place. It's not all about Facebook and Twitter. There are some very influential bloggers out there. I'm sure you've all seen the Google ad for the Cambridge Satchel Company. And one of the methods by which she got her product out to a larger audience was to engage with fashion bloggers and just send them a satchel, get them to talk about it on their YouTube channel perhaps. And these guys have built up a level of influence and an audience that visits them on their chosen web property. It can be their own website, for example. So where are those conversations taking place? How influential are these people? Who visits their site? Do they have any kind of clout whatsoever? That's the power of listening. You can garner a great deal of information about your market before you even think about an outreach, an outbound strategy for putting your content out into the social media space. So be informed first. Secondly, it's really important to agree the KPIs, the objectives for what you're trying to achieve. Now, I'm sure that everybody has a very high-level goal, high-level objective before they get into any kind of marketing effort. Start with the end in mind. What is the outcome that you're trying to achieve? And as I say, a lot of companies have been too reticent to really think about the very end game. What are we going to do in terms of making a difference to the bottom line, to the number of customers that we're engaging with, the number of attendees, the number of advanced sales, whatever it might be? These are some of the events-focused areas that you might want to focus on in terms of your KPIs and the metrics you're going to measure. The sponsors that you attract, the amount of sponsorship that you can attract for your events. Advanced sales are the lifeblood of any events business, or any business that chooses to operate in the event space. Walk-up sales, where they're important. Exhibitor stand sales, but also things like brand awareness. And using those social media monitoring tools, you can get an indicator as to how your brand is penetrating the market. But year on year, how many people are actually talking about you? Is it largely positive? Where's it taking place? Who's seeing it? What's the overall reach of the conversation? How many people are you touching? So these are all valid goals. Brand awareness, walk-up sales, advanced sales, all these different metrics we're going to be measuring. But are they smart? Are they specific? Are they measurable? Are they achievable? Are they realistic? And is there a time sequence to it? Are they time bound? Do you have a target date for achieving them? So increase brand awareness, for example, a valid goal, but to be more specific and to make it smart, how about increasing the volume of brand mentions about your company, your products and your services across social media by 20% year on year in 2014? That's a smarter goal. It's specific, it's measurable, thanks to social media monitoring tools. We can look at the volume year on year. I'd like to think it's achievable, realistic, and it's definitely time bound. Especially in the event space where you can see that there is a spike of conversation, one versus the next. The next part of the strategy, the third stage, is tribes. And by show of hands, who's heard the term tribes before in the context of social media and online digital space? It was pretty much coined by Seth Godin, the respected marketer. But tribes relates to many different things. Tribes is in essence, commonality. It's a common cause. It's what brings people together in any kind of guise. It's a network. It's a community. It's referred to as all of these different things. We have professional tribes. We have personal tribes. So who's got an iPhone, by a show of hands? Who's got an Android phone? Who's got a BlackBerry? Okay, there are some, that's okay. Yeah, so I mean, you'll notice how tribal people get about their phones, especially the Apple lot. I mean, they get really attached and really quite passionate about their iPhones. And don't they get disappointed when all these rumours about the 5S are just an elongated flash aperture, and that's the only difference they're making, apart from obviously the gold case. That's always going to be nice. But people do get this almost irrational sometimes buy-in to a particular brand, to a cause, to a business. So that's what Tribes is all about for me. How can you leverage that? Well, at the heart of your events, at the heart of your business is a cause. There must have been. For it still to be going today. For it to last any amount of time, there must be an underlying cause. There's an underlying pain that you're solving by providing the products and services, the publications, and providing the events that you do. So what is that commonality? Why are people attending? Why are people buying into your brand? Why are people actually going to show up? And once you tap into that, you can start to leverage it. There's also the need to be more efficient in how you reach your target audience. So people have actually built a level of influence over their tribes. And I see more and more businesses and events operators as well, trying to reach their attendees, trying to reach their exhibitors, their sponsors, their partners, one by one. Getting a prospect list together, using outbound means to try and connect with people, often cold. There's still a huge market for cold callers, but not getting the results they were hoping for quite often. And it's inefficient. Trying to reach out to people that you don't really know, haven't got the connection with, and don't hold any influence over. Starting to build a social media presence as well, starting to build your own community is a time-consuming process. It's not going to happen overnight. You need to get people to buy into your cause before they'll follow you on Twitter, before they'll like your Facebook page, before they'll +1 your stuff on Google+. So how do we get quick wins? Well, there are a number of people who have already built a level of influence over your target market. You just need to find those influencers. Ideally, they will be non-competing. For example, solicitors who deal in the corporate law space would do well to buddy up with accountants who are speaking to the same market. Those accountants will have a large client base, they might have a very popular blog, they might be publishing articles all the time and have a big PR campaign and reaching more and more people about their expertise in the field of accountancy. And a lawyer who has no influence whatsoever over that community would do well to buddy up with them. See how that joint venture relationship can work. It's the same in the events space. Again, I'll refer back to the Cambridge Satchel Company example. So those bloggers have built up a community of viewers, people who are interested in fashion. That's all they do, in fact, quite often. The commercial aspect is usually through advertising and affiliate deals. And for the events companies and for the manufacturers and the dressmakers, that's a great partnership to strike up. So who's familiar with Clout? Just a handful of hands. So Clout is a measurement tool. It's an influence measure, in fact. So the guys at Clout have put together an algorithm which assesses how influential you are across social media channels, across the digital space. This is all about how likely are you, in fact, to have your content shared across the web. So it's retweets, it's likes, it's comments, it's shares, it's +1s, it's repins, whatever it might be. All these engagement stats, how likely are you to cause a reaction in your following? And then they give you a score out of 100. So I took the topic of publishing on cloud to see who the top influencers there are. Now these scores are, again, an indicator of how influential they are via Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Google+. There's a handful of networks. It's not a, so it won't take into account, for example, individual blogs or message boards and forums. It's just the mainstream social media and social networks. So Publishers Weekly with a score of 93 look to be top. Random House with 80. Penguin Group with 72. These are all good scores. What this means is that people listen when they speak. And whichever industry you operate in, and from an events perspective, if you're trying to reach a target audience, it might be worth your while taking a look at things like Clout, a couple more are Cred with a K, and Peer Index, to see who holds a level of influence over online communities in that industry. Online influence is only really relevant when there is a context applied to it. It's got to be in the context of an industry. The fourth stage is inbound. How set up are your web presences to deal with the incoming interest? How discoverable are you? So who in their business has dealt with search engine optimization, trying to get their website higher in the search engine rankings? I'm sure the marketers will have encountered that. So this is an aspect of being more discoverable. Search engine optimization is about being the people who get the click-through when you're found on Google results. It's no different in social media. An aspect of that is your clout, your influence. So by being retweeted, by being shared into new networks, you become more discoverable. By using keywords in your profiles and optimizing your profiles, you become more discoverable for the right things in the right context. And that's all about conversing on the right topics. This is the process that I share. And it's simplifying the whole kind of inbound process. Attract is dealing with the traffic. That's about getting more traffic. So search engine optimization is one way to get more traffic. Use of social media is another. Using the right keywords and terms, having the right conversations with the right people. There are a number of other things you could do. Advertising, pay-per-click, PR. They all bring you more traffic. That's the top of the funnel stuff. Converting, which is what many businesses still don't focus on, is getting people to opt into you. Is to give you permission to communicate with them on an ongoing basis. Give them reasons to buy into you. So a very kind of, I'll skip forward to the next slide and I'll come back to this. But this is an example of opting in. And you'll have seen this kind of content marketing strategy quite a lot. This is one that I put together for the legal industry, which is an ebook on how lawyers can use inbound marketing techniques to get more client instructions. And in order to get that ebook, they've got to give me their first name, their last name, and their email address. And they're opting in. They'll get a follow-up email. They'll get the ebook first and foremost. They'll get what's promised. But also, I'll follow up with them afterwards and give them a more targeted message because they've bought in as a lawyer. They're giving me information about them as well. If they show an interest in this particular landing page, I know that they're a lawyer. And when you're more targeted about that message, the higher the conversions will be when people find you. That goes for events as well. Let's imagine this landing page is a ticket sales page. If it's more personalised to the person who's visiting it, it will have a higher conversion. The next is to close. Quite often that's the face-to-face in business. From an events perspective, that's about getting the ticket sale. Are you answering all the questions that people need to have answered in order for them to make the decision to buy, to attend, to come to the event? The last stage is to delight. Hopefully, every business does this, don't they? They delight their customers. They give them 100% good customer service. Keep them wanting more. Keep them coming back. And when you do that, when you do delight, and when you have people experiencing your products and services and the way you operate, then hopefully you cause referrals as well. And that's the best possible way of filling the top of the funnel. That triangular relationship between you, happy customers, and their networks, their tribes, who they're going to tell more and more about you. The other aspect of this is the content itself. That's the fifth stage of the process. You've got to have the content to share. Social media is all about content. Whether it's your status updates, your tweets, 140 characters, it's still content. In the social space, everything you do to generate more business, even outside of social media, even offline, will be attributed to something you wrote or something you recorded or something you filmed quite often. It's all down to content. But it's a noisy space. That's just an indicator of the size of what we're up against in terms of social media. So where do you place yourselves? How do you choose the channels? Well, thankfully, when we look back to the first step around noise reduction and using social media monitoring, we find where people are already having the conversations in our industry. So we can be better informed about where we need to be with our message and where we need to place our content. And then it's just about aligning the content with the people we wish to connect with. It can be ebooks, it can be videos, but there's a massive need now to stand out from the crowd. It is a noisy place, it's a grey place as well. Everybody likes to do the same thing. I'll show the example of an ebook. There are so many companies producing ebooks at the moment. If you try to read every ebook, you'd be there all year and then some. So, how do you succeed with content? Have a content schedule. I work with clients to work on a monthly theme quite often, especially in the build-up to events, so that we want to progress the conversation towards making them more transactional, getting them to the point where they can't do without attending the event, and they're going to be more aligned with the people you want to attend your event. So think about the calendar, think about what you're going to tweet from one day to the next, think about what you're going to share on LinkedIn, think about when you're going to post the event details on the likes of Eventbrite and Facebook and all the other events posting sites as well. Think about when you're going to post blogs. Blogs are a massive tool to grow traffic to websites and to assist in getting the right attendees onto your website so that they can find out about your events when they're coming up. Lastly, how do we know it's all working if we don't measure the outcomes? We've set the objectives earlier on. Now we need to evaluate exactly where we are versus that. Google Analytics and any other web analytics tool is a good start. These guys are getting better at attributing visits to particular social channels and then tracking the visitor flow through your site to show you this guy that came from Twitter did this, visited these pages and then dropped out of your contacts page. That's always a good sign. Get them to your contacts page. But these guys, Camperlist for one, have done a great job of taking it one step further. So this is quite a low-cost measurement tool where you can connect up your Twitter account and your Facebook account, your Facebook page for the business, with Google Analytics to track individual tweets and what happens as a result of the visit that they cause. So you can attribute a particular tweet to a monetary amount that you have transacted. The way you do that is that you have goals on Google Analytics, you set up goals and you can attribute a monetary value to that goal. So it might be a ticket purchase. And you'll be able to track that thanks to Camperlist back to an individual tweet or a Facebook page update. So all of a sudden you can start to prove the return on investment of your participation in social media. Not only that, it will show you other Twitter users who are posting links to your web properties as well. So you can see who your greatest advocates are and how much money they've earned for you. So those are relationships that would be worth nurturing a bit further. Get them to say more nice things about you. It's clear that they've got influence and they're generating some revenue for you. There's a whole host of other analytics that Camperlist will give you as well around that. And lastly, around the kind of conversational stuff and the social media monitoring space, these are some of the players there. Brandwatch is the one that I used to generate the graphs that you saw earlier on. So some of the other players, Radian 6, which is owned by Salesforce, and Viral Heat, there are plenty of options out there. Not many of them are very cheap, I have to say, but for companies of a certain size, this is an important part of staying on top of brand reputation, of opportunity, but also measuring the effect of what you're doing in the social media space. If brand awareness is on your agenda, you need to know how the conversation is growing, whether it's positive or negative, where it's happening, who's speaking, how influential are they. These tools will tell you that. So in talking with events companies recently, I've realized that I assume too much about what people know in the digital and social media space, especially those who work particularly in the marketing teams. So I've put together a very easy, kind of quick win, a takeaway for you today. This is just to get you into the mindset of a 3-stage strategy that you could start employing today. The first of those being to research your industry keywords. I'm sure many of you have used the Google Keyword Planner, especially those that have done some SEO in the past, and some social search tools. Google Alerts, there's one called Social Mention, which is socialmention.com, and there's one called Mention, which I think is mention.net, and they are social search engines, so you can search for conversations across Facebook and Twitter, LinkedIn, blogs, message boards and forums for mentions of your company, your brand, your products. So take a look at what keywords are coming out of that and start to create content that uses the keywords that are most prominent in your target market. Reach out to those who already influence your target market. So use tools like Clout and Cred and Peer Index to find out who's already speaking to your audience, who's got the influence. Look for ways to buddy up with them. One of my favourite ways to have that initial interaction is really play to their ego and maybe invite them to write for you, to guest blog or to write an article that will go on your website. It gives them credibility, it gives them distribution for their content, gets their name out to your audience, but it's just a great initial step for starting that relationship. And then lastly, one of the good measurement tools is, and a very simple one, is to use URL shortening tools like bit.ly.com, and these will not only shorten URLs so they don't take up quite so many characters in your tweets, but they also track the number of click-throughs that you get. To start to see which of your social updates, you can share these links anywhere, by the way, you can even share them in emails or Facebook updates or blogs or on web pages. You can start to see which updates, which pieces of content that you're sharing are garnering the greatest reaction. Are people clicking through? And learn from what you're saying in those better performing updates. What is it that you said? What are the keywords that you used? And what's the call to action that got the best response from your audience? And then it goes without saying, do more of that. That's it from me. You can connect with me, obviously socially, but those are my contact details as well. And I've got some business cards. Thank you for listening to me this morning. Today I'm going to talk about specifically how to use social media in the event space. Now, I was at an event recently where I was shown the definition of the word complex, and obviously you all know the definition of the word complex. I'm sure I'm not going to go into the details, but if you swap the word complex for social, then the definition pretty much still stands up. Which is why when I speak to a lot of people and they look for a simple answer to what social media is and how they can use it for their business, that there's not always a simplified answer. Now, I've tried my best today and I've distilled it into 6 key focus, Facebook and Twitter for many of their events, and yet there's already a conversation online still happening about them regardless. This is a typical graph of the volume of conversation that takes place around an event. I've removed the names to protect the innocent, but you can see that generally speaking, the peak around the conversation across Twitter, across Facebook, on blogs, on news sites, on video sharing sites, and the emerging image sharing sites as well, like Instagram and Pinterest, that all happens on the day of the event. There tends to be a bit of preamble in the run-up to the event, people talking about what their plans are for the upcoming week. Step social strategy for events is noise reduction. I think it's a fair comment that social media is a noisy space, especially Twitter. If you follow any Premiership footballers, you'll know what kind of hot water people get into on Twitter. How can you find the gems of information? It's not all people telling you what they have for breakfast. It's quite a big business-focused conversation. There's a conversation about your business, more than likely. How do you find those conversations? How do you stay on top of it? I was quite fortunate yesterday, in fact, to be working with an events company in London, and we did some research into who was talking about them. They're not terribly prolific on social media. They don't use this areas. This applies to any business that wants to adopt a social media mindset and a social media strategy for their business. And so a bit about me. So I come from an IT background primarily, and I've found my way to social media via digital marketing. I've worked for clients such as Sky, O2 and Marks and Spencer, among others. And over the past couple of years, I've grown my presence in the social media space. I've been a guest on BBC TV and radio a few times talking about the subject. My primary focus now is about how businesses can use social media to achieve real business objectives. I'm aware that there are a lot of businesses still out there that are focusing on the wrong metrics in the social media space. I know we have a few marketers here today, and you'll be aware of this. Fans and followers aren't a guarantee of more business. They're not even a guarantee of more brand awareness. And yet more people are looking for more likes and more retweets and some of these engagement stats. But again, does that really reflect on the bottom line every time? So one of the key features of everything I talk about in social is rooted in real business objectives. It's about leads, it's about opportunities, it's about growing revenue, growing client base. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. So the first stage of my 6